So Bob emails, what do you say? What's all the laughter for? Is it because I'm using the plural of emails?
Yes, exactly.
Annual long-term middle-tier patron Raymond from the Netherlands, he wrote in and says, good old middle-tier patron Raymond, says, Dear Kirk and Bob, thank you for advertising Tony's Chocolonely chocolate.
Tony's.
I was very surprised to hear about this brand on your podcast because I thought it only existed in the Netherlands. There is actually an interesting story behind it that I just looked up this morning to distract myself from the overwhelming feelings of my childhood trauma.
Oh.
Do you know the story of Tony's Chocolate? We looked it up a little bit in a recent episode.
I no, I actually don't know. Yeah, just the smattering.
Well, Raymond tells a pretty good, concise, but interesting story here.
All right.
Tony's Chocolonely was founded in 2005 by a famous Dutch journalist and consumer activist by the name of Toyn van du Koyken, or Tony in English. He did so after he found out that child labor and modern slavery were still very common in the cocoa industry. Nowadays, over 1.5 million children work on cocoa farms in West Africa alone. In some of those cases, children are even abducted and trafficked, which is truly horrible.
Oh, man.
In 2003, so this is before he started Tony's Chocolonely, Tony reported himself, so he's an activist. Tony reported himself to the police as a quote-unquote chocolate criminal because he had eaten a chocolate bar from one of the big chocolate companies, even though he was now aware of the child labor, which is punishable by 4 years of imprisonment under European Union law. So just chiming in here, from the sound of it, there's a law that says if you willingly participate in some sort of commercial exchange with a vendor that you know is engaged in child labor, then you could be prosecuted.
Wow.
So this probably would normally apply to like wholesalers and bigger companies. But he was saying, look, I know that this big chocolate company uses child labor, and I bought this chocolate anyway, so according to the law, you need to arrest me. Tony even went to Ghana to get former cocoa child laborers to testify as evidence against him so that he could be prosecuted. Nevertheless, the Dutch prosecutor wouldn't prosecute him because they said that they would have to prosecute everyone in the Netherlands.
I think they're starting to get the point.
Yeah. Tony then went on to develop his own chocolate company to produce more ethical chocolate. It's called Chocolonely because he felt very lonely in his effort, because he feels alone in his mission. The bars are made of pieces of different sizes to symbolize the inequality in the supply chain. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Hope you found that interesting. Thanks again for your free advertising. After listening to your episode, I just bought 2 bars myself. Haha. What do you think about that, Bob?
Well, A, good choice, delicious, and B, that's a fantastic story. Wow.
Yeah.
You know, like so many of us, we do so little, right? But when he comes to the end of his days, I think he'll look back and he'll say, I wrung it out, man. I left it all on the mat, and I used my time well. Well done, man. That's really cool.
You should be able to say that at the end of your days.
Yeah, well, you know, I don't know, but don't
you think?
I don't know. I'm not.
I mean, you're saying it like it's not something that you can identify with, but maybe you can identify with that.
Not today. Maybe on a different day with a different feeling, but it's such a story. I mean, you show up at the cops to get yourself arrested, not because you actually want to be prosecuted, but because you're trying to make a point. It's a fantastic way to make a point. And like the DA or whoever the attorney is, the prosecutor, got the point because he's like, I can't charge you because I have to charge everybody, which is the point.
How did you find out about this chocolate?
Oh, purely by accident, and it was delicious.
Where did you find it?
Central Market.
Right. So That's where I found it.
Yeah.
It's all over the place. So we call it Central Market because that's what it was always called, but now it's called Town and Country, which I fucking hate.
I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah. But it's kind of a fancier, like a Whole Foodsy, but more
better than Whole Foods.
Better than Whole Foods and more neighborhoody.
Yeah.
More, it's a locally owned.
Locally.
Yeah. I think it started in Kitsap. I'm not sure.
But it's a really good grocery store.
Yeah. Great.
So I'm
seafood.
Totally PO'd about the sushi counter. The sushi.
Why?
Because the old they subcontract that.
Yeah.
Like those people don't work for the market. But they get the space, and whoever used to do it, fantastic, and they would sell you, like you could buy a chunk of like sushi grade salmon or tuna or whatever. You just go up to the counter and you ask for it, and they weigh it out, and then they just sell it to you. And now the people that run it now, they won't let you do that. And have you eaten the sushi there? I don't think it's that good.
I'm not usually in the market to buy grocery store sushi, even at Central Market.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's not delicious.
Okay.
So there, I'm advertising not for them.
Yeah.
But anyways, I found Tony's there just because it was on the shelf and I like chocolate. And
right.
Oh, fantastic.
So, and we're talking about the North Seattle or Shoreline Central Market.
Yeah, that's right.
And I was wondering if you had discovered it there too, because for Raymond, he's like, I didn't even know that people knew about it outside of the Netherlands. And I'm wondering if it's not a very common thing in the United States. But because Central Market is so badass, they know about this mission and like the product. It's also a great product.
It's really good.
I mean, you just liked it because of its deliciousness.
Really good.
And it's just classic quality, right down the middle.
Right.
No like nonsense,
No.
but like affordable and also like a good chunk of chocolate that you get.
Yeah, I know.
And it like Hershey bars, you can. It sometimes feels like you're breaking off like a I don't know, some sort of glued sawdust or something. I don't know. Hershey's can be great too, but I don't know. There's something about the Chocolonely's thing that they got going on, and to hear that it also has this mission is great. But yeah, you should feel very happy about the work that you've done to make the world a better place.
Oh, yeah.
You can take that, right?
Yeah, you know. I mean, I didn't try to get myself arrested or anything like that. So,
well, there's a lot of roads to.
That's true.
You could have done a lot of things with your intelligence and your privilege.
Yeah.
And you also could have phoned it in as a therapist, you know.
Yeah, no, I don't do that.
Which you don't do.
No. Yeah.
Since I identified...
Did I tell you I hired a consultant?
No.
I hired a consultant. She's helping me learn couple therapy.
Oh, I think you did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope I never get tired of learning. Like, there's always stuff to learn.
Even though you've been to several trainings and you've been a competent couple therapist for the past 20 years, there's always more to learn and process. You know, sometimes consultants just give us time to think out loud.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what do you like about her?
Well, she's wicked smart, and she knows her way.
Do you want to advertise for her?
Oh, well, Allison Howe, Howe. She's in Virginia. If you're looking for a couple therapist, she's licensed in New York State. I think she's probably licensed in Virginia, mostly doing telehealth. So you got to be in a state where she's licensed in order to be able to see her.
As a client.
But
as a consultant.
Oh, yeah, anybody could hire her. And she does PACT, P-A-C-T, psychobiological approach to couple therapy. And she's just articulate and she's fantastic. I really like her.
When I think of Howe, I think of the jersey that Cameron wore in Ferris Bueller. Didn't he have a Howe? Isn't there a hockey guy?
Gordie Howe, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I think of when I think of Howe.
Yeah.
Since I said emails, plural, let's read another email.
Right on.
Listener Sarah from Texas, she says, I'm currently enrolled in a counseling program to become a licensed professional counselor. I am 1 year in, and I feel like I haven't learned a thing, as most of my program has relied heavily on textbooks. Most of our lectures are a recall of the books, so I feel even less motivated to do the reading. Meaning that why would I read it if you're just going to spout it to me in class? I was excited to go into the program at the start, but now I am feeling like I will enter my internship completely unprepared.
Yeah, you will.
Graduates of the program, what do you mean by that?
None of us are prepared to start. There's no prep. There's only do. And that's, rough a little bit, but you find your way. But we all did it.
Can you say that like Yoda? None of us feel prep.
There is no prepare. There's no prepare. There's just do.
You're not doing it right.
I'm not doing it right. I don't know how
it's
to do it.
It's supposed to be prepared you won't feel, do you must.
Yeah.
Or do you will or something. Anyway.
Yeah.
I'm actually surprised I pulled that out.
Nicely done.
Going on. I was excited to go to the program at the start, but now I feel like I'm completely unprepared for internship. Graduates of the program tell me that most of our education in the program will come from field experience. But this doesn't sit right with me, as we are affecting real lives. I just want to know if this is normal for a licensed professional counselor program, or if I should be expecting a drastically different experience. Thanks in advance. Bob, what do you think?
I don't know enough about the array of grad programs, but I can't imagine that you're going to learn any other way than to actually practice. So I would think that your experience is typical. I wouldn't worry about it too much. Do the reading. Just do it. And the thing that the reading in your curriculum is about the program being accredited, probably, so that you can be licensed as a result of your education. So you definitely need it, just in terms of being within the bounds of the law, and figure out what's interesting to you and go learn that. Mm-hmm. In addition, but I learned how to do couple therapy by being a couple therapist. Do I love that idea? No, I don't love it at all. But I don't think doctors learn how to be doctors except by being doctors. They didn't.
Yeah. Yes, you have learned how to be a couple therapist by being a couple therapist, but you didn't just put couples on your schedule.
No. I sought lots of training.
And you thought about it a lot, and you consulted a lot, and you observed yourself a lot, and you took note of what was working or not. It's not just doing it.
No.
It's
There's more to it.
Doing it while having a parallel dedication to furthering your wisdom and skill set.
Right. And I had supervisor consultants early in my career. Well, this is just the latest round of that. I've been doing this for 34 years now.
Yeah.
And I have a consultant now.
Yeah. You're very humble and differentiated and mature and a good role model. All the best therapists that were mentors of me and that I looked up to and have looked up to are folks that will continually seek training and consultation and supervision, are very quick to pick up the phone and call a colleague, like the way that you and I talk to each other.
I call you, yeah.
And are humble and recognize that therapy is largely a mystery and is a struggle, and that it's not only normal, but it's expected that us as therapists are going to lose perspective all the time.
Oh, I just lost perspective on a couple, and we mutually agreed to part ways. They said it's not working, and I agreed with them that it wasn't, and gave them some ideas about what they might do, and was very clear with them. The problem isn't them. The problem is me. There was something about their dynamic that was raising up my trauma. I told him this.
Well, let's get into it. Do you mind?
Well,
without breaking confidentiality, so avoid saying anything specific to their issues
sure.
or identifying them.
Right.
But generally speaking, what happened for you?
I was angry with them frequently. And also...
What was triggering you? Generally speaking.
I didn't like the way one of them was treating the other.
Okay.
And I didn't like that their system was impervious to me. I couldn't affect it. And I didn't like that my heart rate was up for most of the session. Most sessions, I saw them maybe a half a dozen times.
Yeah. So it's totally normal for us as couple therapists to be triggered in this way. And it's also very frequent that we will witness mistreatment, whether it's abusive or not, in front of us and being told to us as they recall fights that they had in the previous week. And it's distressing. It's hard to observe, and we naturally want to help with that. And there's a natural and maybe even a therapeutic impulse to tell the person that is being harmful to stop doing that and to help them recognize what they're doing, especially if they have a hard time acknowledging that. But how do we actually help? Yeah. Is it this way or is it that way? We're also human beings with our own histories. We also have the feeling of responsibility, which we do to do something and to at least try to be effective.
That's true. We do.
And if we seemingly aren't affecting change, then it can feel bad for us. We feel responsible. We should feel responsible for giving it our best within reason, but we shouldn't feel like we're a loser or that we're failing and that it's our fault or that things need to change overnight, So there's a balance there. Countertransference with couple therapy is off the charts compared to other kinds of therapy. So there's that. And also projective identification. The more passive partner might be provoking us subconsciously to fight their fight that they're suppressing and all that. So you're going through all that.
Yeah, it was.
And it was not fixable for you?
Well, not fixable. I don't know about that. I just know that 6 sessions in, this is the conclusion that we reached. And I gave them ideas and was very clear that the problem was not them, because I wanted them to, and I believe that they should have hope, and they shouldn't walk away from couple therapy with me thinking anything about their relationship is, doomed or hopeless, or that pursuing couple therapy with somebody else wouldn't be better. Like there's every reason that they should go, and I hope that they do or are. And
because you're worried that upon termination, they won't seek another therapy.
They might think, oh, maybe we're not workable. No, that's not a fact. And, if I saw them maybe 18 months from now, I might have a different countertransferential response or manage it more effectively or whatever. I don't know, because I'm always growing. So this is, and I want to say this to the person who wrote in, because this is 34 years into my career, and I'm still learning.
There's
and hopefully,
no matter how engaging and non-book regurgitating your graduate school courses were, you would still be here.
Yeah, that's true. It doesn't matter. So one of the things that's true about me, though, is I am not shy about getting training. I have sought a lot of training out, and that's been probably made the hugest impact on my career trajectory.
Did you terminate with them?
It was mutual.
Who brought it up?
I brought it up the session, the second to last session. I said, I don't think I'm helping you.
Yeah. How many sessions did you have?
Maybe 6 total. Thereabouts.
It was early.
Early on, yeah. And then the next session, they came in, and that's where they started with, we decided that this isn't helping. And like, okay, do you want to have this meeting? And they said that they did, so they did have that meeting. And kind of interesting to me was when all bets are off, I'm less nervous. So I think I was actually more effective in that last session simply because, I didn't have to, somehow I was free from, I don't know, a sense of responsibility or whatever, and more flexible, more playful, more loose. So anyways, you never stop learning. People, you're not an expert. Or even when you are an expert, there's still stuff to know or learn. So, humble. Humble counts for a lot.
You've run into this exact...
Oh, God, yeah, all the time, man.
And yet you don't normally entertain termination. I mean, you might have a fantasy of termination the way a lot of people will, but you wouldn't entertain a practical, actual broaching of the topic. If the client wanted to terminate, then you'd have a conversation.
Yeah, we'd have that conversation. No. What I do is I consult with you when I need to. Not very often these days, but when I need to, because it doesn't happen like it used to. And I'm much more savvy, and I'm much softer than I used to.
So with this client, did it feel, again, without divulging any kind of details or potentially harming them by making them feel bad or something?
No.
But with this client, did you feel like one or both of them wasn't really participating meaningfully? Because I hear that asterisk in what you're saying, like because it's one thing if they're participating meaningfully and you had that to go on, I wouldn't think you would even entertain the initiation of termination with them.
It's an interesting question. I think that everybody's doing the best they can at all times, and they think that both of them were locked into a certain view of themselves and their partner that they could not release. Like in couples, it doesn't matter where you are, you're always in one another's care. But for those of us who have a trauma history, we can see our partner as the enemy.
Right. And so, you were trying to loosen that up.
Oh, yeah.
Like the way a dentist might try to dislodge some plaque on your teeth.
Or tartar or something.
And they kept closing their mouth and turning away from you.
Yeah, they were, their system is pretty...
and that's why you were, because it's universal that couples come into us with conflict, and very frequent that we'll find that, at least from our cultural perspective, that one person is being more of the jerk face than others. Not always, but
people are indeed abusive of one another, either physically and severely, or verbally and maybe you could say less severely, but certainly impactful. We do that to one another. So
hurtful and unreasonable and intimidating and bulldozing
and blind spots, like, oh no, the problem isn't me, the problem is you. I do this thing because you blah 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 blah.
But that is universal in couples that we see in our office, and that's why we have our jobs. But the kicker was, you felt like after 5 sessions, they weren't really open to your shtick.
No,
and so that's why you were thinking about trying.
Yes, yeah.
Well,
that's rare.
Yeah, and better earlier than later.
Yeah, but the only reason I wanted to talk about it at all is because that person's coming through grad school and they're just getting started and they feel weird about the fact that they're going to practice and they're not going to know a thing about what they're doing, and they'll be just a member of the club. Your job is to show up and keep learning, not to be an expert. Mm-hmm. In fact, don't be an expert, and try to be nice to your fellow students because they don't know what they're doing either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. So, piggybacking on that, Sarah from Texas, what I will say is that there are 2 possibilities. One is that you're in a normal, good enough programs. You're in a normal, good enough program, graduate school, in that, as Bob is saying, no one feels prepared. Every student I've ever worked with, as they're heading into internship, will tell me that they feel like they don't know what they're doing. And sometimes they'll feel like it's them. Sometimes they'll feel like it's the program. Sometimes they'll feel like it's something else. It's a panic. I'm guessing that it's similar to skydiving or something, that you can do all the prep, but as the first time you jump out that door, you're probably like, what the fuck am I doing? There's just no way around that. And as I always say, 99%, if not more, of what I know and understand, regarding humans and psychotherapy occurred outside of the learning occurred outside of graduate school. And I have a shit ton of graduate school. Yeah. I have the equivalent of 2 masters and a doctorate and a bachelor's. So, that's saying, meaning that I did learn a lot of things in grad school, and yet almost none of it is really, when I add up all the things that I know and understand and have learned, it's a small portion. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is that you are actually in a bad program. There are those programs, or the professors that you've had thus far have been the bad professors in that program. And the grads that you've talked to are either, they don't know what they're missing, or it's, a sample of people that just had good professors while they were in your program, or whatever, or they're just trying to make you feel better, because, the way you describe it, it does sound bad. I mean, just regurgitating the books in class, that's atrocious. I, as a professor, even when I was just starting out, knew better than to do that. That's completely wasting the time of the graduate student. You assign the readings, and then you're going to waste their time in class by just regurgitating what they supposedly already read. In fact, I almost never even talked about the readings in class because I assumed that they had read it or skimmed it sufficiently, and I just moved forward with what would naturally precede having read and absorbed what was in the. And also, it just set this culture of keep up, folks, because you're in graduate school and you're a fucking adult and you signed up for this and you're paying a shit ton of money, so I'm going to make it worth your money. Do your homework, and if you don't, you're going to be lost. So keep up. We're trying to do something big here, and we have a limited amount of time. So read it. And this is coming from someone that reads very, very slow and understands that a lot of reading can really be a burden. But, like I said, there's ways of skimming. Yeah, and as a person who's been through a lot of grad school, I've had the occasional professor that does this. They typically will use PowerPoints a lot. I had one professor that would literally, I think, just copy and paste the book into a PowerPoint and then make it into this like bullet list. And in each frame, each slide would just be like filled with words. It's like the direct opposite of what a PowerPoint is supposed to be.
Sounds like a non-PowerPoint. Not very, a weak point.
A weak paragraph. And along these lines, I came up in the field before PowerPoint was even invented. I think, at the very least, we didn't have projectors or computers. There's a chance that when I first started teaching at Antioch, there was probably a total of 3 computers in the entire university. Like including all of the administration and the professors, there could have been literally 3 computers that, a few administrators had to keep track of some data. But it's possible that all the records were by paper back then too. Even like I know the transcripts and the graduation forms and everything. Anyway, so I wasn't familiar with PowerPoint. But even when it came around and I started seeing my colleagues using it, I tried it out. I hated it. I found that it just made it so everyone just stares at the PowerPoint. And I think it orients people towards reading and test prep or something. It feels that way. And so I figured out ways to convey information without using PowerPoints. I write on the board. I will write stuff on the whiteboard. And I find that people are much less likely to stare at a whiteboard list than they are to stare at a PowerPoint. I learned so many things like your facial expression, your hand movements. I made sure to kind of pace around the room to vary where I was, and also just to keep me alive. If I sit behind a desk while I lecture, it's a very different vibe, energy-wise, for me and the collective system than otherwise. And to hear you, Sarah, in a program where you have already done the reading and then you sit down in class and they just regurgitate that and they don't have any interesting things to do in class, and there's no practical, like that was the other thing that I would intuit, but also hear from students and get feedback in the moment, was that when I talked about a real case, the students were riveted, because of course they are. That's what they want to do.
Yeah.
To read a paragraph about a theory is one thing, but to hear a story about like, this is an actual client, people were like locked in attention on hearing about this, because this is like what they wanted. They're not looking forward to reading about theory in their career. They're looking forward to working with clients and to hear stories of success and trial and tribulations and ethical dilemmas and stuff. They're fascinated by that, and so having that application is important. And I've always strived to do that in all the things, including the podcast. Let's take a break. We get back, more emails. What do you say?
Yep.
All right, back from the break. Let's do an OPP. These people became patrons all the way back in 2017 and have stayed a patron for the past 7+ years. We have Laura from Evanston, Illinois. We have Tovi from Sweden. We have Alina from Medford, Massachusetts. We have Lee from Vallejo, California. Jan, or Yane, from Finland. Jeff from good old Redmond, Washington. Sean from good old Seattle, Washington. Sean, I think, is an old friend of mine from college.
Wow, really?
I mean, it's the same spelling, and from Seattle. I must have known he was a patron, but if you're still listening, Sean, reach out to me. I'd love to chat. We have Patty from Renton, where I was born. Dr. Andrea from Ireland. Junius from Silver Spring, Maryland, another person from Silver Spring, Maryland. Last episode, we talked about that. And thank you so much for becoming a patron, staying a patron for the past 7 years. All right, this next email is from Annual Anonymous Patron from California. She says, "Hi, Kirk and Bob. It is so wild that the very morning of your Bobisode was released, where you discussed charging clients and late cancellation fees, my therapist was a no-show for our session. She had completely forgot and left me hanging. She called me later to apologize and sounded like she had just woken up. It really chaps my hide, because if I don't show up, I get charged for the session, but if she doesn't show up, then I'm just screwed. What compensation should be given to clients when therapists flake like this? Is the time I took out of my work worth anything? How about the emotional upset that I had to swallow because I had to go right back to work and had no time to process this? I know Bob usually says to bring it up with your therapist, and believe me, I will. But this imbalance of her time having value but mine not having value seems really unfair. Where does a client go from here?" Bob.
I have done this. I've flaked out on clients, and I always say, next one's on me, and I don't charge them for the next session because I believe that my client's time is worth something, and this is what I can do. It probably helps. It's probably shitty when you get flaked on. Sometimes I've double booked, maybe half dozen times in 35 years. Sometimes I've overslept. Sometimes I've just forgotten. It's rare, like maybe 10 or 15 times over the course of my career, something like that. And every time I'm like, next one's on me. And, it's something. But it is an acknowledgement of the flake. And I agree with what the person wrote here. I don't think it's cool. Not that therapists don't screw up. And, that's just people. But to not consider that, hey, it's two here, not one. No, my time isn't worth more than somebody else's. So, yeah, like, what up? And I got that from my first supervisor. He's like, he had a no-show on me, or he double booked because he had a couple that was in crisis. This is years ago. And he's like, yeah, I can't see you today. Next one's on me. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, okay. It's real easy, and it is reciprocal with that policy in terms of the money, that kind of thing. Yeah, I've done this a handful of times in my career as well. As a person who operates from home in person,
Yeah, right.
and since I'm the sort of person that can get ready very quickly, I had a client show up on time.
I remember this story.
And rings the doorbell in my house. I'm asleep, complete sound asleep, and I just sit up quickly in bed. I'm like, oh shit! I put on my pants and put on a shirt, run to the door and peek through the door and say, I need 5 minutes. And they're like, okay. And then I get my shit together and within maybe 6 minutes or something, I'm at the door and I'm apologizing for being late. And maybe it takes me a few minutes to get my brain up and running, but not great that I was late, but I didn't have to cancel. But yeah, other times where I don't know if I ever double booked, but I seem to remember when it seemed like I had double booked and I couldn't tell if it was my fault or their fault, or you know what I mean. But yeah, there have been other times when I've absolutely just flaked. Like I seem to remember a time when I just failed to write it down in my schedule for some stupid reason. Like I had made the appointment and just didn't actually write it in my schedule. And if I don't write it in my schedule, then it's just gone. So yeah, and when those things would happen, I would absolutely offer this. But not only that, but I would feel so bad. I would have the impulse to just like refund all their money and give them free therapy for the rest of their life, or just driving across the border in shame or something. Because of course, I'll do whatever I need to do to make this right. Because I feel horrible for it. Not it's one thing for a client not to show up, but it's another fucking thing for a therapist not to show up. I mean, that is some bullshit right there, and that's harm. For us to, as therapists, for a client not to show, oh, boo-hoo. You know what I mean? It's like you're out of that money, or you charge the money and you have a free hour or whatever. And maybe it's a little bit of a hit to your ego or something, but get over yourself.
Yeah,
for a client to be abandoned in their therapy in that moment and to lose that trust of, do they care? Are they dedicated? Are they going to be there in the future? Oh, I have an appointment today, but maybe I'm bothering them. Am I a burden? It's not okay. So of course there should be something done. Now, maybe your therapist, anonymous annual page from California, doesn't have guidance around that. Maybe your therapist will do something. Maybe your therapist wants to do something. Who knows? I mean, it sounds like there's no indication the therapist doesn't care. But yeah, your sentiment, patron, is received and shared. Let's take a break. We'll get back more emails.
Yep.
Right, next email, annual middle tier anonymous patron. She says, hi, Bob and Kirk. Thank you so much for your most recent... Thank you so much for your most recent... Oh, by the way, getting back to the last email, someone DM'd me and said that your and my discussion about late cancellation fees, it didn't acknowledge... I mean, they weren't criticizing. They were just saying, by the way, as a woman therapist, when I do enact my policy for late cancellations, I will get a lot more pushback from clients who will say, how dare you charge me for this late cancellation? Other therapists didn't charge me in the past, or something like that.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, it just feels like cultural misogyny, and I hope that person just sticks to their policy, and if you lose a client over it, then so be it. Your career's long, so you gotta look after yourself.
Yeah. And I don't know if this was what she was saying, but I heard other people saying things like younger people today have more entitlement or an expectation of accommodations, like is another thing, right? Because there's a lot more ADA compliance and a lot more understanding for folks and their issues that are preventing them or hindering them in ways that accommodations should be provided for. And if they were late to to a session, or if they didn't show and they have ADHD or something, they might say, hey, I should have an accommodation for that. And what do you think about that kind of stuff?
I think that's a mistake. And I think that's a therapist that accommodates that is being loose with their boundaries and is treating their client like they can't be responsible. There's ways to manage that stuff. And so if you say, oh, the burden of managing your, in this case, ADD is on me, then what's your client learning? They're learning that they don't have to look after themselves or be responsible or show up or figure out a way to manage their trouble with attention. You're going to do it. Well, I thought you were there to help. If you're not there to help, then what the fuck are you doing? So fucking help. I saw those responses on Patreon about several people saying they thought it was bullshit to charge for client no-shows. I don't understand it at all. It makes no sense to me. First off, I got to pay my bills, and this is how I make a living. But beyond that, I think it's a misunderstanding of having good boundaries, and good boundaries make good relationships. And maybe it's a generational thing, but it just seems to me that there was an abandoning of good policy, good boundaries, not because it's about the money, though that's a factor if this is the way you make a living, but because it's about a therapeutic principle. Like, you should have good boundaries. Your clients do better when you have good boundaries. So that bothered me, and yeah. Really.
Oh, it did?
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember this.
Oh, yeah. You and me, we had to talk about it, and then I looked at the comments on Patreon. And
we talked about it on the podcast.
Yeah, and then several people wrote in, and they thought, that was, that you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't charge for client no-shows. I don't.
Yeah, I think it's this. There's some wisdom to it in that there's in the past a lack of acknowledgement that for some they have additional issues or issues of various sorts, whether it's a psychiatric disorder or some impact from society, for example, whether it's racism or sexism, or their community lacks public transportation because the politicians don't allocate funds, or they have a kid who has special needs or whatever. And women are often the ones having to take care of the kids with special needs, not always, but more often. And to not accommodate is to participate in the oppression. And that's real. At the same time,
yeah.
There's got to be some kind of a line there.
I'm far from rigid about this shit.
Right. And that's the other thing. Like, you and I both, I think, said in the episode that if a client had a viable excuse, and there's a pretty low bar for that, by the way, then we're not going to charge. Like if their kid suddenly got sick and needed to be pulled out of school or something.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'd be a dick if I charged.
Right. We wouldn't charge for that.
No.
But if it's a chronic, typically the people who late cancel or don't show, it's a pattern.
Yeah.
The vast majority of clients that I've worked with, particularly in the last 10, 15 years, if they don't show, they will tell me they will pay. And before I even have to ask, and most of the time I'll say, oh, don't worry about it, because the reason why this happened makes sense to me. And the last time you did this was 3.5 years ago, so I wouldn't worry about it. So might some people, regardless of generation, but maybe younger people, because they have progressed past that past oppressive culture, you know what I mean? They're aware of the oppression. Then you're going to have some people who are going to be confused about that or abuse it. It's sort of like with trigger warnings. The whole trigger warning concept is a sound one and a necessary one regarding PTSD. You don't want to, as a professor, for example, show that scene from the girl with the dragon tattoo where a girl gets raped. You don't want to just suddenly show that in class, in a film class, for example. without taking into account that some of your students might be suffering from PTSD, and on average, it probably is true, and it will completely throw them into a psychiatric state for the next 3 weeks and might even cause them to drop the class or drop out of school, attempt suicide. These things are real to expose people to their traumas in that way.
Yeah.
So
that's about decency and humanity.
Right.
Yeah.
But then you had, and so as we in our field would advocate for trigger warnings,
right,
you also had a whole group of people who would claim trigger warnings or claim that they were harmed when PTSD was not an issue. They just were uncomfortable, or it was unpleasant to watch or something. They would rather have not watched it, but it didn't throw them into a psychiatric dissociative PTSD, state for the next 3 weeks.
Bit precious.
It just felt like uncomfortable. And, we can have a conversation about that if a professor is like making everyone feel uncomfortable, like, sure, but it's not in the same category as a fucking trigger warning. So in the same way, might you have some people that are claiming accommodations or are claiming you're being oppressive. It's the same exact thing when I hear from young students today who are about to graduate and they are trying to figure out how they're going to pay off their student loans and make a living. And I will throw out the options. Typically it's private practice, group practice, or agency. And they'll say, well, I heard that I'm not supposed to go into private practice because only privileged people can afford going to therapy, and therefore I'm participating in the oppression. And I say, well, yeah, but that's not your fucking fault. It's the fault of our field as a whole. It's the fault of the taxpayer and the politicians for not allocating funds so that everyone can get the care that they deserve. It's the fault of our capitalistic system that puts half of the wealth in the top 1%. It's the fault that our system also doesn't pay more for your tuition. You are just one person. It's like saying that you don't deserve to have a car because it pollutes the environment. Now, if someone doesn't want to have a car because they don't want to pollute the environment, then go for it. But it's not our fault that we don't have proper public transport. It's not our fault that we've had gas-burning cars shoved down our throats for the past 70 years. It's not our fault that the capitalists refuse to relent on this. It's not when they could have had electric cars decades ago. It's not our fault that
that's true.
We have an infrastructure, a power grid that is way over dependent on things like coal and natural gas and gasoline, diesel and that sort of thing, propane, methane. Yeah, to drive a car is to participate in harm. But are you voting? Are you advocating? Are you doing what you can to minimize it? You got to get to work, and you're but one person. So why is it a burden on you? Plus, at the very least, for the novice therapists, people like you and me, Bob, should be the ones that are giving back to society because we have established careers. We've already paid off our student loans, and we're more established monetarily. The average student graduating from school is destitute. I mean, I certainly was. I was $80,000 in debt. In today's money, that's probably like $150,000. Half of it was on credit cards, earning like 20% interest.
Yeah.
And I was earning $2,000 a month, and I was having $1,100 to interest alone. So I did live very cheaply, but with the remaining $900, I couldn't pay all my bills. I think I had like $1,100, $1,200 in bills every month. And so I was going into debt. Should I have not done what I did, which is to go into private practice? Because that's, in our arena anyway, it's in our region, it's the only place that you can actually manage to get on top of your...
You did it instantly, right?
3 years. Well, I worked one full-time job and 2 part-time jobs. I worked 70 hours a week, 7 days a week.
Yeah, I remember.
But half of it was private practice, and the private practice portion was part-time, but it made more money than my full-time job.
Yeah.
So, and as soon as I had paid off all my shit, I scaled back at the agency to the point where they eventually just fired me because I was only working there a few hours a week.
Right.
I did that because I wanted to not be living paycheck to paycheck. And even then, when I became a private practicing therapist, it wasn't like I was rich. I didn't save any money. I didn't have money in retirement until I started working full-time at the university 12 years later. And they forced people to have retirement. Without an option, a portion of your check every month went into a retirement fund that was inaccessible essentially until you're of a certain age.
Right. Oh, you're getting close too, by the way.
Yeah, I know. And I think I was 40 years old when that happened. I didn't have any savings or any retirement or any investments or any assets. And I was in a very successful private practice. So it's not like you're living high in the hog when you're a private practicing therapist, and you're working your ass off.
Yeah.
And not to pat ourselves in the back, but you're saving the world. We could have worked in tech. Do you know how many tech jobs you and I surpassed? Or
all of them.
Yeah, you and I were at the center of.
Oh, that's right, because of where we live.
Yeah, in the 90s,
right.
Everyone just getting a job at Microsoft meant you had stock options that meant that you were instantly rich after those vested in a year or two.
Yeah.
And everyone around me was buying houses right away, and had all sorts, on paper they were like a millionaire and stuff. And I said I would rather be doing something to make the world a better place. Not that people working at Microsoft weren't, but I wanted to do something that I felt better about at the end of my days. In the same way, we have, I think, a lot of younger therapists, more novice therapists that are being yelled at by society, that the burden is on them to fix the oppression of our society. And I say, are you supposed to sacrifice everything? Are you supposed to sacrifice your entire life? Aren't you already sacrificing enough? And you're not greedy for asking for compensation. Plus, if your service is part of an oppressive system, it's the system's fault. It's not yours. Now, if you're doing nothing to address it, okay, but pay off your student loans, get on your feet, and then start thinking about it. And if anyone ever tells you it's all your fault, then I don't know. I just don't think that's okay. And it's often told to young novice therapists by people like us. That's what I would hear. They would tell me, well, my professor said, and I said, your professor told you that it's not okay for you going to private practice because it's greedy.
Yeah, what do they know?
And I'm thinking, wow,
Yeah.
Wow.
It's, yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Can't smell our own bad breath, I guess.
Yeah. So regarding, charging, we have passionate views about it.
We do. Yeah. Not rigid views, but passionate. Yeah. Well, and that was a tangent. What was the email?
Well, I was just reminded of a lot of the responses, and I'm open to changing my mind about this. Oh, the other thing that I was thinking briefly is that, someone was DMing me saying that, well, Kirk, because I was saying I hadn't had someone push back on a late cancel or even have a late cancel in a long time. And they're saying, well, that must be because of sexism. And of course, sexism is rampant. And I would frequently hear from my female colleagues as therapists and as professors about pushback from students and clients that I had never even, I could never imagine happening to me. So, sexism is real. But if we rewind the clock back to when I was first a therapist for the first 10 or 15 years, I had late cancels all the time. And yeah, I would get pushback. Because of my bad billing policies, because I would wait for these balances to build up, or I would allow people.
Yeah, mistake.
There were several clients. We're talking on the order of maybe 30, 40, 50 clients that had outstanding balances in the thousands that I just wrote off and said, well, I don't want to send them to collections.
Oh, no, you shouldn't do that.
And I've bugged them for the past 3 years to pay their bill, and it's kind of on me for not having charged them up front. So I guess I'm shit out of luck.
Well, that's an important learning curve to have.
Yeah, but I also chalked it up to, well, it's a part of my pro bono policy of giving back to society. I mean, obviously, and because the people who weren't paying me, it wasn't like they were rich. They were struggling too, and so they just, and their priorities or were thinking that they would kick the can down the road, or I don't know. So
I think as you develop, though, you become more seasoned. You have an understanding of money and its role in therapeutic relationship or whatever. Like that sounds like, because I had the same problem, not several clients, and two, where I let a balance build up, and I just didn't know how to handle that back then.
Yeah,
and I learned.
You've always been better than me.
Yeah.
But yeah, same. I was much worse. Plus, today they make it so much easier with credit cards. I mean,
oh yeah, right.
I remember when
easy.
That Square. It was this thing you would plug into your phone into the jack, and you could use it as a credit card reader. And I remember when that came out, like in maybe like 2012 or something. It was a game changer because we could actually charge credit cards. Because before that, I think you had to have one of those.
I had one of those too.
You had one of those things, yeah. And now with Venmo and even they'll have it. You just have a credit card on file and you just charge it. In the past, that just that wasn't a thing.
Cash only.
Yeah, it was cash or a check, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I had a little dish. Eventually, that I instituted this because I don't know. It's so dumb, but I always had a hard time with the money exchange. I remember now that for a few years, maybe longer, I had this little dish, sort of a decorative dish on the coffee table or the end table, the couch, and then you have the end table. And I told everyone to put the payment in that at some point in the session. Without me having to prompt them, hopefully, that kind of thing. And a good number of clients would do that. Yeah. Anyway.
Where'd you put your tip jar?
Wouldn't that be funny?
Have you ever gotten tipped?
I feel like maybe.
I got tipped once.
What happened?
The person was from a country where that's just the culture.
How did they tip you? Like, what'd they say?
They said, I want to give you a tip.
How much did they give you?
$40.
Huh.
And that represented about half or thereabouts of my fee at the time. This is many years ago. And
like they were appreciative.
Yeah. And they were lovely. And
Is this in private practice?
Yeah. I didn't want to accept it and tried to turn it down. And I realized fairly quickly that to do so would be insulting and not worth it. So I just accepted it.
Did they do it again?
No.
Yeah. Yeah, not a big deal.
Yeah.
You bring that up in an ethics class and you're going to get a lot of gasps, but,
well,
as long as you're not actively exploiting someone.
Yeah. Get over yourselves.
Yeah. I just want to read this email and then, because I halfway read it.
All right.
Thank you so much for your recent, so this annual middle to an anonymous patron. Thank you so much for your recent episode where you discuss Bob's experience in therapy and the concept of complex trauma. After many years of feeling like I was just a garbage human being, my therapist has finally convinced me that I suffer from complex trauma due to childhood brimming with emotional neglect. I grew up into a self-loathing, self-denying, hyper-successful achiever who is now sitting on her mountain of gold and feeling like a shell of a person. Anyway, I really appreciate Bob explaining how excruciating therapy is when you suffer from these problems and you have a desire to quit. I both feel an incredible attachment and love towards my therapist, and I feel terrified of her. I feel unlovable. I struggle to attach to my husband. I struggle to have depth in relationships. I struggle to feel like death isn't an obvious solution here. By the way, don't worry. I'm not going to act on that. And my therapist is aware of my thoughts. I am lucky to be in therapy now with a fantastic psychiatrist who functions from a relational humanistic model and is determined to sit with me as I muddle through my own funhouse mirror of feeling unlovable at my core. I see her 3 times weekly, and I know what she's trying to provide, and I know she's trying to provide one massive corrective emotional experience for me. It feels like trying to carve a tunnel out of a mountain with a spoon. I really want to say I appreciate Bob's bravery and willingness to be so honest about the pain that comes from constant shame and disorganized attachment. I feel less alone hearing Bob, which helps.
Thank you.
Bob, what do you think?
Well, thank you. And whoever this is, man, they're a good writer. These images are really evocative. Good writing.
Yeah.
I'm glad, that's the only reason I talk about that stuff is because I hope for it to have an impact. And so thanks for letting me know. And best to you.
All right. Well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because
you deserve it.